Hello, and welcome to MIT's 16885X, Engineering the Space Shuttle. I'm Jeff Hoffman, Professor of Aerospace Engineering in MIT's Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Before coming to MIT, I was a NASA astronaut for 19 years. I flew 5 missions on 4 of our 5 shuttles, and I was the first astronaut to log 1,000 hours of space shuttle flight time. One of the great, enduring, and most valuable legacies of the space shuttle are the great observatories that were launched by the shuttle, and in particular the Hubble Space Telescope, whose design enabled efficient servicing and upgrading by 5 shuttle crews, transforming a telescope originally launched with early 1970s instrumentation, not to mention faulty optics, into a much more robust and capable spacecraft. Hubble is still going strong today after its final servicing mission in May of 2009 and is now fitted out with 21st century instrumentation, enhancing its sensitivity by almost 3 orders of magnitude over what it was launched with, even if its optics had been perfect from the start.
Hello, Jeff.
I was fortunate to be a member of the EVA crew on the critical STS-61 mission in December 1993, when we rescued the Hubble Space Telescope, fixing its flawed optics and turning it into NASA's most successful and productive science mission ever. And I'll be giving a lecture in this course about servicing the Hubble Space Telescope. The first space shuttle mission, STS-1, where STS stands for Space Transportation System, was the initial test flight of Columbia, launched with a human crew aboard on April 16, 1981. A date shared, by the way, with the first human orbital flight of Yuri Gagarin back in 1961, and, by happy coincidence, with my own first space flight on Discovery in 1985. The last space shuttle mission ended with the landing of Atlantis on July 21, 2011. And during those 30 years of space shuttle operations, the 5 space shuttles were NASA's human spaceflight program. 355 individuals flew aboard the shuttles, some numerous times, some only once. And for the first time in NASA's history, some of them were not professional astronauts. The 7-person crew of the space shuttle, with only 2 pilots required, really opened up the astronaut corps to non-flying people like me, with science, engineering, and medical backgrounds. I flew on Discovery, Atlantis, Endeavour, and twice on Columbia. At one point I was assigned to fly on Challenger, but Challenger tragically was lost in 1986. As you no doubt know, we also lost Columbia in 2003. These 2 terrible accidents were failures of the safety process, which should be part of good systems engineering. The accidents claimed the lives of 14 astronauts and remind us that the space shuttle was far from a perfect vehicle. In this course, you'll learn about the many factors that drove the designers of the space shuttle to make some significant compromises, as well as how they were actually able to create the most versatile spacecraft that was ever, or perhaps ever will be, designed. The space shuttle had many successes, and it broke new ground in numerous areas of spacecraft engineering. It was the world's first reusable spacecraft. Its development led to many technological advances, and in the course of its 135 missions, we've gained sufficient mastery of operations in low Earth orbit that NASA is now able to turn over many low Earth orbit operations to private companies, which are bringing reusability to a whole new level. In this course, we're going to use a systems engineering technique developed in our MIT Aero-Astro department known as Conceive, Design, Implement, and Operate, CDIO. We'll look at the conception, the development, the implementation, and that is the construction and the testing, and finally the operation of the space shuttle to tell a systems engineering story. What makes this course unique is that this story will be told by the people whom the story is about, the people who conceived, designed, built, tested, and operated the space shuttle. So let me now tell you how this course came about. Every year, MIT's Aeronautics and Astronautics Department offers the 16885 course, which we call Aircraft Systems Engineering. The class analyzes a selected aircraft in great detail and students also do some individual aircraft engineering research projects. I was talking one day with some of my colleagues who teach 16885, and we remarked on how the space shuttle was really designed as an aircraft that could fly all the way into space and back again. So why not devote a 16885 class to a detailed study of the systems engineering of the space shuttle? As a 5-flight NASA astronaut, I took the responsibility for organizing the class, but I was very fortunate to have as a co-leader Aaron Cohen, who was the Space Shuttle Orbiter Program Manager. He later became the director of NASA's Johnson Space Center, and after retiring from NASA, he joined the faculty of Texas A&M University. He eventually retired from Texas A&M, and we invited him to come to MIT in the fall of 2005 as a visiting professor to co-teach the course with me. As program manager for the shuttle, Aaron supervised all of the engineers who designed the space shuttle during the 1970s. As you'll see during the lectures, almost all of these people had previously worked on the Apollo program, as had Aaron Cohen himself as manager of the Apollo Command and Service Module. Many of these engineers had already retired by 2005 when we taught the course, but Aaron called them all and said, "Hey, I have one more assignment for you. How'd you like to come and talk to a class of MIT students about the system you designed for the shuttle?" And you know what? Every single one of them agreed, and they all came to MIT. Now, by the time I joined NASA in 1978, the space shuttle had already been designed and was mostly built. But as an astronaut, I got to know many of the people who operated the shuttle, launch operations, mission control, payload operations, and I invited people from these areas to participate in the course. Aaron Cohen and I realized that in addition to teaching students about the space shuttle itself, this course would also illustrate many principles of systems engineering. As I mentioned earlier, in the Aero-Astro department at MIT, we approach systems engineering through the CDIO system: conceive, design, implement, and operate. I just described how we invited the people who designed, built, tested, and operated the shuttle, but to fully cover the systems engineering of the shuttle, we realized that we also needed to cover the conceive part. Why was the space shuttle built in the first place? What were the driving factors that determined what missions it should be able to carry out? This conceive phase deals with determining the requirements that would drive the design of the space shuttle. A basic principle of systems engineering is that you should fully understand the requirements that a system needs to satisfy before you design it. Faulty requirements lead to engineering disasters. So, to begin the course, we have several lectures on the origin of the space shuttle. To understand the technical requirements, you really need to understand the political, economic, and historical factors that drove the design of the shuttle. And any of you out there who are engineering students should realize that in your careers, you're going to have to deal with many issues that are not just technical. And I hope that what you learn about the early history of the space shuttle will serve as a good example. When we were planning the 2005 class, we realized that bringing together all the people who designed, built, and operated the shuttle was a once-in-a-lifetime event. You'll see as you follow this course that many of the lecturers were fairly old even back in 2005, and in fact, many of them are no longer alive, including, sadly, Aaron Cohen himself. Recognizing the historical significance of these lectures, I arranged to have them all videotaped. Now, we didn't have high-definition TV back then in 2005, and the recordings were done live in class, so you'll occasionally see people walking in and out of the classroom in front of the camera. Sometimes, I'm afraid, the sound quality is less than perfect, and in particular, some student questions are a little hard to understand since the students did not have individual microphones. So when appropriate, we've inserted subtitles. Also, most of the engineers talking about the early design of the shuttle systems went back to the notes they used in the early 1970s, which for the most part were overhead slides. Today's students rarely see overhead slide technology, but please be tolerant and try to enjoy the constant skipping around from 2018, now, to 2005 to the early 1970s. But for all its technical shortcomings, the original lectures have fortunately been preserved for posterity, and these recorded lectures form the bulk of this 16885X course. After the original 16885 course was finished in 2005, all the lectures were posted on MIT's OpenCourseware along with the slides, and over the years I've received numerous emails from people all around the world who watched and enjoyed the videos. However, the videos were never edited and the slides were posted as a separate file, so it was often difficult to know what slide the lecturer was talking about. Some years later, MIT created MIT-X, which pioneered the concept of massive open online courses known popularly as MOOCs. I created our first space-related MOOC course, 1600X, an introduction to aerospace engineering, astronautics, and human spaceflight, which proved to be very popular. Some of you taking this current course, 16885X, may have already taken 1600X. If you haven't, and presumably you are interested in spaceflight since you're listening to this course on the space shuttle, you should know that all the 1600X lectures are archived on MIT-X, which uses the edX platform, and you can listen to them anytime. Also, 1600X may be repeated as an active course sometime in the future with an active discussion forum, graded problem sets, and the opportunity to earn a certificate of completion. If you're interested, check the edX website periodically for course announcements. Many 1600X students wrote to MIT-X requesting more space-related courses, and this led me to consider turning our original 2005 Engineering the Space Shuttle class into an online course, editing the lectures and integrating the slides into the lectures. In 2005, when the original class was held, the shuttle had made its first flight after the Columbia disaster. It turned out that despite major repairs and modification to the insulation on the shuttle's external fuel tank after the loss of Columbia, some foam still fell off the tank during this STS-114 return-to-flight mission. So as the lectures were being given, shuttle flights were again on hold. Also, it's important to realize that in January of 2004, President George W. Bush had announced that the space shuttle would be retired after the construction of the International Space Station was complete. At that time, President Bush also announced what was referred to as the Vision for Space Exploration, which came to be known as the Constellation Program. This involved a new series of rockets, known as the Ares 1 and 5, and a new human-rated spacecraft, known as the Crew Exploration Vehicle, or CEV. Many of the lectures in this course refer to the Constellation Program, the Ares rocket, and the CEV, but to avoid confusion, wherever possible, I've edited out all these references since the Constellation Program was eventually canceled. Well, it's now 2018. The International Space Station has been fully built out and is operating, one of the Space Shuttle's lasting legacies, along with the Hubble Space Telescope. As I was editing these lectures, it was interesting and somewhat sobering seeing myself 13 years ago. You'll note as you compare this introductory lecture and also the short introductions that I've added to the original lectures that my hair is now a bit thinner and is now all white compared to back in 2005. However, my enthusiasm for human spaceflight, and in particular my gratitude to the Space Shuttle and all the people who designed, built, and operated it for having given me so many incredible experiences, remains undiminished. I'll tell you, putting this course together has taken a lot of work, but I hope that it will allow you to gain a deeper appreciation for this remarkable vehicle and for the human effort that went into it. Many books have been written about the Space Shuttle, some of which are listed in the bibliography that you can download as part of the material accompanying these lectures. But no book can convey the experience of hearing how the Space Shuttle was designed, built, and operated by the people who actually did it. We've also included as accompanying material short biographies of all the lectures for this course. So now let's talk a bit about the details and organization of this course, 16885X, Engineering the Space Shuttle. The course is divided into three main parts. Following the CDIO principles that I mentioned earlier, the first four lectures cover how the concept of the Space Shuttle was born and evolved. These lectures are non-technical and should be easy to follow for everyone. The next group of lectures cover the design, construction, and testing of many of the Space Shuttle's subsystems. These lectures cover the design and implementation parts of CDIO. Some of these lectures go into a fair bit of detail that may be too technical for some people. However, every lecture contains material that should be understandable and of interest to everyone. So before each lecture, I've added a short introduction that will include some advice about which part of the lecture will be appropriate for people with more technical backgrounds and which parts are accessible to everyone regardless of technical expertise. I hope that these short introductions will help guide you through these lectures as efficiently as possible. The third part of the course deals with how the Space Shuttle was operated, the final O of CDIO. And these operation lectures should be understandable by everyone, regardless of technical backgrounds. In looking at Space Shuttle operations, unfortunately, we must also deal with accidents. And this section includes a lecture by MIT professor Sheila Widnall, who served on the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, giving an insight into how we analyze the causes of accidents and how changes are made to correct the problems. The course also contains a special lecture by Chris Kraft, who is a legend in spaceflight history, the man who created mission control and directed NASA's Johnson Space Center during the critical time when the Space Shuttle was being developed through its initial test flights. Finally, I thought it would be interesting to look at the Space Shuttle from the perspective of 2018. And so the course wraps up with a panel discussion among myself, who flew on the shuttle, former flight director Wayne Hale, who gave the lecture in the original course on mission operations, and space policy analyst John Logsdon, who gave the lecture on the political origins of the Space Shuttle. A few comments now on how the course is being presented. Each lecture, plus the associated question and answer time, runs about 1.5 to 2 hours. We'll normally put 2 new lectures online every week from now until the course ends the week of December 17th in 2018. While the course is being run, students can participate in a live discussion forum, sharing opinions and asking questions. Students are encouraged to try to answer other students' questions wherever possible. The discussion forum will be monitored here at MIT by our teaching assistant, Nick Anastas, and by myself, and we'll attempt to answer any questions that don't get answered by students themselves on the discussion forum. Finally, we've prepared several sets of questions to make sure that you understand the material presented in the lectures. When you take a course on MITx, you have the opportunity to earn an official certificate of completion from MIT. To get a certificate, you must formally register, pay a nominal fee, and receive a passing grade in your answers to all the posted questions. You'll find details in the online background pages for this course. I really urge you to register for a certificate. The questions will not be overly technical, I promise, and working for a certificate will really motivate you to follow all the lectures carefully and get the maximum benefit from this course. Well, that's pretty much it as far as an introduction to 16885 and engineering the Space Shuttle. It's time to begin the course. So I invite you now to listen to the first lecture by Dale Myers, who was NASA Associate Administrator for Human Spaceflight from 1970 to 1974, the formative years when the need for a reusable spacecraft was being debated and the requirements for what would eventually become the Space Shuttle were being developed. So once again, welcome to 16885X, Engineering the Space Shuttle. As you go through the lectures, please post your comments and questions on the discussion forum and take part in the interchange. I hope the course is informative and enjoyable, so let's begin.